Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Just Open It, the YouTube series in which I open recently acquired toys. My name is Russ, thank you very much for watching, I really appreciate it. If you're a fan of toy collecting, action figures, or pop culture in general, please subscribe to my channel, Karaoke Fanboy TV. Every week I'll be opening a recently acquired toy or action figure, and this week, just when I thought I was out of the superpowers business for a few weeks, having recently found all of the Wave 1 figures and vehicles, McFarlane Toys drags me back in with the Phoenix market release of the next Superpowers action figures. Now, I did find all at the same time the Batman Who Laughs, the Flash, and the highly controversial Jon Stewart. I say controversial because we weren't sure where in the waves Jon Stewart was released. And I'm here to answer that question for you. The mystery is solved. If you haven't seen it already online, on the back of Jon's packaging, he is a singular addition to what we fans are calling the Wave 1 Superpowers collection. Superman, Darkseid, Batman, and the two vehicles. I'm starting to think that maybe the concept of waves with superpowers is a bit of a misnomer for us. And these figures are simply going to come out as they come out, in numeric order, as you saw there on the packaging, which is kind of an homage to the original Superpowers as well, in that Superman, of course, is number 1, Darkseid number 2, and so on. So the Flash and the Batman Who Laughs released shortly after, I presume, Jon Stewart, and so simply added here in their packaging. But I'm just wondering if the concept of waves really doesn't exist here, and these figures are just going to come out as they come out. So I was excited to find them all, and I will open Jon Stewart first and save these other two figures for future videos. I'm excited about Jon Stewart because when I was a kid, I had a lot of Superpowers action figures, obviously. I'm a big fan of this brand, if you haven't figured that out already. But among the core Justice Leaguers or Super Friends, I did not have Hal Jordan. I did not have Green Lantern when I was a kid, for whatever reason. So when that early 90s Superpowers follow-up line of action figures came out, what was it called, DC Superheroes? Something simple like that. That Hal Jordan was my first Green Lantern action figure ever. But I did, as an adult of course, find a Superpowers Hal Jordan in the aftermarket, probably at a collectibles store. So I have a Hal Jordan, and I'm going to include him in this opening to see how the two figures size up, because I'm seeing a lot of fellow fans' feedback on these toys, specifically that their scale is not in line with the original Superpowers figures. And that's something I haven't really explored yet here, as far as a new character like Jon Stewart, which I think really is the potential of this brand to add characters to the Superpowers line rather than revisit the ones that came out back in the 80s. And yet with the Flash and Superman, Batman, Darkseid, it seems like it's going to be a, well, so far it's like a 60-40. Because the Batman Who Laughs and the Green Lantern are the two only real new figures we had, with a redesigned Supermobile and a brand new Batwing. So the vehicles are kind of a 50-50 as well. So I'll continue to revisit that idea of mine as I review these toys. But let's open Green Lantern, and I'm going to tell you, you saw the other two, just by sheer packaging appeal, by sheer display appeal in the box, I like these figures much better than the first three already. And I really think that's because they don't have capes. Green Lantern, Flash, the Batman Who Laughs, they don't have capes. There's no cloth or whatever that ribbon-like material was here. So they're just very simply streamlined figures. Just the toy, and in this case, an accessory, which is great as well. So let's get into this figure here. First, his bio. Jon Stewart is a former U.S. Marine who uses his military training and discipline to protect Earth and the rest of Space Sector 2814 as a member of the intergalactic peacekeeping force known as the Green Lantern Corps. As Green Lantern, Jon wields a power ring which creates a protective shield around him, allows him to fly, and generates hard light energy constructs in the form of anything he imagines. Fueled by willpower, Green Lantern's power ring is one of the mightiest weapons in the universe. A very comprehensive bio here. And I like that it identifies his military training to distinguish him a bit from Hal Jordan, who was an Air Force pilot, but not a Marine, so it definitely gives him an identity of his own, right? So, and to be honest, I don't know if I remember correctly that Hal was an Air Force pilot or just a pilot. It might have just been a private pilot. You can comment below. But the figure is open with a fairly clean removal from the card, but I'm not keeping it. And the Green Lantern art, if I had to identify that on site, I think somebody in the comments can do so more effectively than me, but that Justice League artist from a few years ago, was his name Ed Bennis or something like that? Be making a fool of myself here, but I think that's something like that. It looks like his kind of style. Not a very dynamic pose compared to some of the classic Superpowers figures. You know, if these were characters meant to, and some commenters have said that these figures appear to be as if they should remain on their card. They're for adult collectors, not to be opened, and they should remain on their card as kind of nostalgic collectibles. If that's the case, I wish that the card art was a little more dynamic, that this was a bit more of an action pose. Maybe he was at least surrounded by the energy shield alluded to in the bio. That would at least create some continuity and concept for kids that are tearing into these toys. But here we go. Jon Stewart, Green Lantern. Now here's the deal. Comes with the lantern. My Hal Jordan no longer has his lantern. Would I be willing to pay another $10 just for a lantern for my Hal Jordan? Of course not, but a lot of second-hand dealers of toys often inflate the price of accessories, knowing that we, as fans, want to complete these toys we may have had since we were kids and the weapons were lost, or maybe we're buying these things piecemeal on the aftermarket, and that's the only way we could find the accessories to follow. It's just a question I'm posing here. Is that little lantern, which is very sufficient for a Superpowers Green Lantern, a lantern battery, would I spend $10 on that alone if I saw it somewhere at a Comic-Con or a collectible store or something to complete my Hal Jordan? And if I did that, I would then have an extra Jon Stewart for customizing, or to pretend he's a clone or something. I don't know. So here we are. Jon Stewart, Green Lantern. You'll have to forgive, in the spirit of green, I think the gardeners are outside trimming, doing some landscaping, but just checking him out here. I could feel, as I move his legs, that kind of clicking that the McFarlane toys have had in the past with those joints, with the standard-sized McFarlane toys, DC Universe figures, DC Multiverse figures. So I'm just curious about the construct there and what that's all about. I don't really care for it, but okay, here he is, Jon Stewart. I'll put his lantern in his hand here. See how easy that is. And it's funny because when we were kids, we would, apply these accessories so recklessly, and that sometimes contributed to them breaking. In fact, I think my 1990s Hal Jordan figure, that lantern handle broke because of the anxiousness in which I tried to put it in the figure's hand after multiple times of play. So now as an adult, we're like really tender with this, right? Like we want this to the collectability, the displayability, it's way more important to us. But here he is, lantern in hand, and I think he looks pretty cool, Pretty simple. It's just a black suit pretty much with some green accents. The ring is pretty prominent on his hand. I like that the hand meant to hold the lantern is evocative of the Hal Jordan hand of the classic Superpowers line. Here's that action pose I wish he had on the on the card art. And so finally, how does he stand alongside his brother-in-arms here, Hal, who, despite some of the comments I've read that the classic Superpowers figures tend to degrade because of their action feature, this Hal Jordan's in pretty great shape. I don't know if it's because his previous owner didn't play with him as much as a kid or what, but the action feature itself is failing. But that doesn't mean that the quality of the figure has diminished and that this arm isn't posable anymore. That might be different when the feature was kind of the dual punch. But at least for Hal, fortunately, it just affected one arm. The other one is very stable. So I'm just now, for my own sake, standing these figures side by side. And I know they're small on the camera here. But this was a bit of a hasty record because I just found these figures and I wanted to get this out there. So as I'm standing them side by side, it does appear as if Jon is a bit taller than Hal. If I go back to back on them here, you could see that the proportion isn't quite right. Well, I don't know. They're about the same height here. It's actually hard to tell because these figures, as we've discussed, are a little beefier, right? Their chests seem way more inflated. Hal is a bit more slender in his torso. So it's not so much the scale by way of height, but the proportionality, if that's the right word, for these two characters. And maybe for Superpowers Classic and Superpowers McFarlane, for lack of a better descriptor, that's how they stand side by side. The wider stance here, because of the action feature, which would be indicative of a lot of the early Superpowers toys, also kind of creates a bizarre contrast when you're displaying the two characters side by side. This is just a way more traditional stance for contemporary action figures, whereas the action figures of the 80s had these gimmicks that often affected the way their limbs were built onto their bodies. So all in all, I do like Jon Stewart. From the packaging to the figure itself, I'm just going to say that I find his overall demeanor a little less dynamic than I would have liked, considering that the name of the line is Superpowers. Not a super powerful stance here on Jon, in comparison to the seemingly always battle-ready Hal Jordan with the wide legs and the raising of his ring here. So, all in all, I am still a fan of this line, but with a very critical eye. And I do think that these figures that have followed are going up in quality without the cape and that pesky hole in the cape from the packaging that eliminates one of the points of criticism I had. So what remains itself is just the quality of the figure. And the sculpt, the paint, the accessory is great. I like it a lot. It's just kind of lacking that power that the very name of the brand implies. And maybe future figures, as these have seemingly done, will adjust accordingly to this kind of feedback. All right, thank you very much for watching this opening and makeshift review. I really appreciate it. Join me next time when I look at another toy here, specifically one of these Superpowers toys. And I say, you know what? Just open it. I'll catch you next time.